common question that I've been frequently asked is how much muscle mass have I lost since I started training for a HYROX? I come from 10 years of a bodybuilding background, training for hypertrophy, training for aesthetics and how I look. However, more recently my goals changed and I decided that I didn't just want to look good, I wanted to feel good and be able to perform well. So this led me down the path of training for a HYROX. Now HYROX is getting more popular. People are transitioning from other sports, or in my case, bodybuilding, into this type of training. And a key concern that I see for people is how am I going to keep my muscle? How am I going to look how I want to look? Now the key thing here now is you're training for performance. So you're not typically eating just to look a certain way or to build a certain amount of muscle. You are actually eating now to fuel your body to optimally be able to perform and also recover. This was a concern for me too. I didn't want to start this conditioning and this running type of training and look in the mirror and not like what I see, or ultimately lose all the muscle that I've worked so hard over the years to get. For context, this was me as a bodybuilder using PEDs in prep, and this was me after PEDs, 12 weeks after, completely off, no longer competing, just about to start my HYROX training. So let's talk figures. At the start point of my HYROX journey, which was around September last year, I weighed 85.2 kilograms. Today, while I sit here, I weigh 83 kilograms. Now, the most important thing is my body composition is very similar. Don't get me wrong, in certain areas of my physique, there has been loss of muscle, but in terms of the overall muscle mass that I've lost, it has been very little. Now, the reason for this is because of how I train and how I set up my week for success to retain the tissue, to get fitter, to get stronger, and overall look how I want to look. Now, have I lost muscle? Yes, of course I have, but I haven't lost too much. If you look at the photos, I'm slightly softer and my muscles don't have as much pop to them. And the reason for this is because my specific training is not tailored towards a certain look, nor am I fueling for an aesthetic look, okay? Of course, I'm eating healthy and being very cautious with what I do eat, and I'm eating a balanced diet. But my training is the key driver here to the adaptation, the change in what you see to my physique. So my initial thoughts of, will you lose muscle whilst training for a HYROX? Yes, you will. If you're coming from primarily a bodybuilding background, like me, I was strength training 5 days a week. Now all of a sudden, my weight training has changed. The volume and the setup has, as well as my output, is as good as tripled. I don't have as much pop and maybe not as much upper shelf or as much arms, but overall it's still, in my opinion, a decent physique. So moving on to strength, how has HYROX training affected my overall strength? Now, the type of training is completely different. I've been reintroduced to barbell squats, flat presses, RDLs, deadlifts, different movements that as a bodybuilder, I typically shied away from because I simply didn't have the cardiovascular fitness to complete a full set of squats, believe it or not. So I would always opt for a hack squat or a pendulum, so it's actually humbled me. So in terms of measuring my strength, I've had to compare, let's say, a flat dumbbell press versus a flat dumbbell press, because that still is in my program. And the truth is, I used to do 55s for 8 clean reps. As a bodybuilder, using PEDs, I can now do 48 kilograms for typically 8 to 10 reps. So the loss of strength there is minimal, but my ability to work and complete the sets and my aerobic capacity during those sets has 10x'd. I can perform those sets so much better and a lot more seamlessly. So my peak strength may have slightly declined, but my overall functional strength has improved. My day-to-day activities, getting the dumbbells up onto my knees before I press them, all seems a lot easier. Whereas as a bodybuilder, when I used to do basic tasks, i.e. sometimes getting steps in the off season or getting dumbbells up before a lift, I would be gassed. That's no longer the case. So I don't mind losing that little margin of strength to regain so much more functional fitness. But overall functional strength and aerobic endurance is actually up, which is my preference and which is my goal at the minute. Whilst peak strength is down, actual volume lifted is up. So even though the number at the side of the dumbbell or on the machine may be slightly down, the volume over the course of the session is actually up. So you could argue there's not really been too much lost. And this is down to me being able to last longer in a set because my aerobic fitness has improved and I'm able to chase higher numbers. And this is a key thing now within HYROX training. When I do my weights, I work down in ascending sets. So I will always start with the higher volume sets and then build the load up to the lower volume sets. Quite the opposite of what I did in bodybuilding, where I typically do a loading set, drop the weight 20% and do a back off set or straight sets. So the type of training and how I lift weights has actually changed now, but my ability to be able to perform better for longer over the session has actually improved. However, there is one big benefit that a lot of bodybuilders will probably like to hear and may encourage you to switch over. You don't have to be as to the point with nutrition. Of course, I still eat very healthy, balanced diet, eating the right amount of protein, carbohydrates and fats, but you can eat way more because you need to fuel for performance. The sessions are a lot more taxing, you're burning a lot more energy, and ultimately you need to replenish and refuel in order to be able to then perform. So you are able to eat a wider variety of food. You don't have to measure exactly to the gram, and you can have that little bit of sauce here and there if you want it. So in terms of sustainability, far, far greater. Because in my case, I'm eating more and I'm still keeping my abs. I'm still keeping in good condition and I like how I look. Here's another thing that I need to be completely clear on. I haven't dropped weight training completely. My typical week still consists of full body 2 times a week. Now, this has changed. I used to do upper, lower, rest, upper, lower. But as a lot of HYROX athletes will know, this is too much. And I'm too dense at the minute to be very good at HYROX. So I actually need to lose a little bit of muscle. So if you want to retain tissue, you may want to look at upper, lower, rest, upper, lower, and then have your conditioning placed around it. However, I found this too much. So I do full body twice a week, which allows me to hit every muscle group twice a week across my physique. This therefore means I'm doing conditioning and erg work typically 4 days a week. So that's taking my total training week to 6 out of 7 days. On top of that, I do have double sessions, 1 zone 2 run, 1 interval run, and then also a long run for time on my feet. So this may look like 1 5K, the intervals maybe 0.4 kilometers, rest for 60 seconds and repeat 10 times, and then a run typically anywhere between 60 to 90 minutes. So you can see here that the output in terms of aerobic work and conditioning is far greater. So over time, the longer I do this, I'm not a fool. I know there's going to be muscle lost. So as I get to a physique that one I'm happy with, where I can perform at an elite level with HYROX, I'll then increase my weight training. But the main purpose of this video is how have I sustained the physique, how have I only lost a little bit of muscle, and that is down to still keeping weight training within my split twice a week. However, at the start, 3 times a week, potentially even 4, as I said, as I was getting used to the type of training. But what I've quickly realized is to get good at this, you need to prioritize it. So for me at the moment, weights are not a priority because they're not in the HYROX. And likewise, when you are lifting weights for a HYROX, the eccentric portion of the movement is not important. Likewise, when you are doing burpee broad jumps, when you're doing lunges, you're using momentum. You're trying to be smooth with the movements and reserve energy. As you will know when you're training from a hypertrophy standpoint, you're trying to control the eccentric portion because this is where the muscle is under the most pressure. This is where you're going to get the most mechanical tension. HYROX is a complete opposite. So it's adjusting your mindset to not do the lunges with time under tension, to just get on the floor for the burpee board jumps. These are things that you will need to consider. It's a big change and it takes time. Now we've talked around the physical changes. What about the psychological? Going to the gym and leaving without a pump on is quite hard. Going to the gym and just sweating and doing cardio is something you will need to adjust to, and it took me time. I felt like I'd not achieved anything. However, now I actually look forward to the gym much more when I'm doing conditioning or erg work or a run. And the reason for this is because it releases unlimited endorphins and I feel like I've achieved everything and more. Versus weights now, I know the weights are just there to keep the physique, to keep the aesthetics. So I'm a little less motivated to progress those. So I'm just sustaining the load. I'm not aiming to get stronger at the minute. I'm just training weights to essentially drive in some volume, drive in some tension, and allow me to just be good at the wall balls and also good at lunges and other elements of the HYROX as well. What I've noticed during the conditioning is you need to go to darker places than what you do with weights. A conditioning session is going to have you at a heart rate of 130 plus for 60 minutes potentially. A top set as a bodybuilder might last 15 seconds. So you've got to talk nasty to yourself for a lot longer. So what I've actually learned is I've unlocked new levels of potential. And what this conditioning and this HYROX has made me want to be like, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this who have transitioned or are very good at HYROX, makes you want to be superhuman. I want to be strong, I want to be fit, I want to be fast, and I just want to be unstoppable, and I want to be ready for anything that comes my way. And this is why I feel like HYROX is so popular at the minute. Keyword being at the minute. This, in my opinion, will only continue to grow because of how it makes you feel, the balance you can have with nutrition and food, and the sustainability of this long term. I personally believe this is going to take over. For me personally, I've not really noticed any mental performance benefits, but I'm already quite disciplined with anything that I do. I'll give it 100%. But for people who may be looking to unlock that next level in terms of mental performance, I'd recommend it because you're going to have to take yourself to some pretty dark places to get through a full conditioning session. And that's going to learn your discipline. That's going to improve your skill set, which will transfer into other avenues of your life. So a little bit different today, but I've had a lot of questions over the last few months of how I've sustained the look and what I've done in terms of training. So I thought it made sense to cover it on a video. If you want anything more HYROX related or any videos that you want to see, remember to comment, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.